Shabbat Shalom. We want to welcome each and every one of you that is here in all study and teaching. And those of you that are coming into Otero, Shabbat Shalom. The Sabbath is beautiful. And everybody was singing and dancing here up in front and rejoicing, and Adonai has done all of this today we are going to start preparing for Passover during 25. Deliverance, kind of a pre-celebration of redemption, of being bought out, and the blood of the Lamb served to give life to the firstborn. Number 2, Passover became a yearly. Moshe said, do this every year. It's a yearly feast that recalls that event, again with 2 parts. And you ate the lamb and you had a celebration. 3rd, Passover is also the day that Yeshua inaugurated the new covenant. It was in a Passover meal that Yeshua says, as often as you do this to remember me by. This is the blood of the Brit Chadashah, of the new covenant in my blood. He purchased everlasting life. by his death for mankind, and Yeshua added a third component. Before this, there was only two parts: the sacrifice, the lamb, and the celebration. Yeshua, after the celebration, after the meal, after supper, he took another piece of bread and a third cup, and he used that to make himself the Passover celebration. And of course, Passover, fourthly, is the basis of the modern Jewish Seder and the Catholic Christian Holy Communion. So this is kind of like a little overview of that. Now, Passover, the terms that everyone needs to learn is Passover in Hebrew is Pesach. Can everybody say Pesach? And then it ends with a Pesach. Pesach. And also with the Feast of Pesach, we're going to be learning, is the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Pesach is the 14th of the first month of Eve, and the Feast of Unleavened Bread is the next 7 days. So the season of Pesach is actually an 8-day period. The actual Pesach celebration, the 14th, and the 15th to the 21st is the Feast of Unleavened Bread, or Chag Hamatzah. Chag Hamatzah. And the matzah is the bread, the unleavened bread. And in Hebrew, today they use the little crackers. In biblical times, they use would be more similar to our tortillas. So in our celebration, we use tortillas for the matzah, and pico de gallo for the bitter herbs. Pico de gallo makes the best bitter herbs. If you don't know what pico de gallo is, look it up in the internet. Makes good maror. Now, the progression of Passover. Let's look how Passover progressed to the present day. First of all, the first Passover was in a house. It was in Goshen, the land of Goshen. And each family, and this is the key, this is part of what we're going to be teaching in the next 4 weeks. The key to Passover is a house, a home celebration with the father, the grandfather or the patriarch of the house, being the priest of the home from the beginning. And never until modern times has Passover been a congregational service. Do not go to congregational Passover. I would encourage you, study, do it in the home. After this, we had the Exodus, and we exited Egypt. We left Egypt. Then, a year later, when we got to Sinai, Adonai told us build a tabernacle, a mishkan. And so Moses builds a tabernacle. Now, the first lamb was celebrated in the home. The blood was put on the lintel and doorposts of the mezuzot of the house, and then eaten right there. On the second Passover, the fathers took the lamb to the tabernacle where it was slaughtered, sacrificed, and then they took the carcass back home. And throughout the 40 years of the wilderness, when the tabernacle was in Shiloh, when the tabernacle was in Jerusalem, they would go slaughter the lamb, bring the lamb home, roast it at home, and eat the Passover at home. Same thing occurred when Solomon builds the temple. When Solomon builds the temple, everybody went, took the lamb to the temple where it was slaughtered. The blood was sprinkled on the altar. And then the carcass was taken back home, and the father celebrated the Passover at home. Now, Solomon's temple was destroyed in 486. Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonians came, destroyed Solomon's temple. Now remember, we're going to find out that in Torah, we are told the only place that you could celebrate Passover is when there is a tabernacle, a temple, and when the temple was built, it was built in Jerusalem. Only in Jerusalem can you celebrate the Passover, the Pesach. Can you sacrifice a lamb? You cannot sacrifice a lamb in any hill or outside of Jerusalem, only in Jerusalem. And so, all of a sudden, for 70 years, we were captive in Babylon. For 70 years, we were captive in Babylon. At the end of 70 years, Zerubbabel came along with Ezra and Nehemiah, came and rebuilt a destroyed temple. They built what we call Zerubbabel's temple. Solomon's temple was magnificent. Zerubbabel was very humble, very small. This is the temple that Antiochus came in and desecrated. And of course, the Maccabee family came and rededicated that temple, and that's why we have Hanukkah. And so Zerubbabel's temple, a very humble temple, now was built. And so for 70 years, we didn't do Passover. For 70 years, we didn't have a temple. Now Zerubbabel and Ezra starts the Passover sacrifices again. About 27 before Messiah, Herod rebuilds Zerubbabel's temple. What Herod did is, here's Zerubbabel's temple, which was very small. And Herod built around it, built a big, magnificent temple around that one. And then this one they dismantled. And so Zerubbabel's temple and Herod's temple, even though they're different buildings, are called the Second Temple period. And so Herod rebuilds the temple. And again, the Passover sacrifice is done at the temple, the slaughtering. The carcass is taken back home. And the father again presides at a home celebration. In 70 of the Common Era, Herod's temple was destroyed. And so for the last 2,000 years, from 70 of the Common Era or 70 AD, for the last 2,000 plus years, we have not had a Passover sacrifice. The last sacrifice was in 70 AD. And so this kind of gives you a little progression, again, of the Passover from the first Passover in Goshen through Sinai, the wilderness, Shiloh, Jerusalem, and then the destructions and rebuilding of the temples and the final destruction of Herod's temple in 70 AD, and 2,000 years of not having a Passover sacrifice. Now, the Passover sacrifice is called the Korban Pesach. The Korban Pesach. A Korban is a sacrifice. Now, the first Passover, as I said, was in the home. Now, Exodus 12, 1 through 14 gives us, and I'll let you go study that at home, but here are the points of Passover that we need to put in our mind and heart. First of all, Passover begins on the 10th of the first month of Aviv. The 10th of the first month of Aviv. On the 10th, the lamb was selected. It was a one-year lamb, had to be perfect, had to be with no spot, nothing wrong with it, no broken legs, no any kind of scars or anything like that. On the 14th at twilight. Now, twilight is when you see 3 stars appear. You look for 1 star, 2 stars, Then you see 3 stars, that's twilight. So the sun goes down over the horizon, over the western horizon, and it starts getting dark, and you start looking, and when you see 3 stars, it's twilight, and at that moment, the Passover lamb, the Korban Pesach, was sacrificed. Now, on the first Passover, and only on the first, the blood is put on the doorposts of the house. At no subsequent Passovers is blood put on the doorposts of the house. Only the lamb is roasted. Remember, it's a 1-year lamb, so it's not a big old sheep. It's a small little lamb. And what we were told to do is find out how many people in the house for the number of lamb as a communion offering. The Korban Pesach was a communion offering where everybody, like today with bread, we get a piece of lamb and eat it as a communion offering. It wasn't a meal type. There was a secondary lamb, a Chagigah lamb, that they ate as a meal, celebratory meal. But this one was just a lamb that you took a communion piece. No bones were to be broken. There was to be no leftovers. Any leftovers were to be burnt. It was eaten with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. Now this is key. The original Passover had the roasted lamb, the unleavened bread, and the bitter herbs. That's it. 3 things on the plate on the first one. The second and subsequent, then they had a celebratory meal. And by the way, that's where the wine comes in, because wine is a symbol of Passover, of celebration. So that's where the wine came in at that time. It wasn't part of the first one, because remember, in the first one, there was nothing to really celebrate about. It was a day of gloom and sadness, especially for all the ones that died. Now, this Passover was in the home, and you could see them eating there and putting the blood on the doorposts of the house as they're preparing for Passover. The blood, we are told, will be a sign for you on the houses where you are. When I see the blood, I shall pass over you, and you will escape the destructive plague when I strike Egypt. Now remember, whoever has blood on the door, I will pass over and protect. The actual Pesach actually means to protect. But if there's no blood, then there's no protection. The blood protects. The blood of Yeshua protects. No blood on the doorposts of your heart today, no protection. The plague of death will get you, eternal death. But with the blood of Yeshua, His life will save us even today. Now, the second Passover was in Sinai. And the same thing here. It was on the 10th of the first month. They got the lamb. The 14th at twilight, the lamb, the blood on the doorpost was not put. No bones broken. It was roasted, unleavened bread, bitter herbs. But now we have a celebration. We have a celebration of the Passover here on Mount Sinai. Now, at the first temple period, it was the same thing. Same thing. The blood now is on the altar, not on the doorposts of the house. Again, roasted, no bones broken, no leftovers, unleavened bread, bitter herbs with celebratory meal. We are told in 2 Kings, no Passover like this had ever been celebrated since the days of the judges. It doesn't say no Passover was celebrated. A lot of people are saying there was no yes, there was, but no Passover like this one was. And again, 2 Chronicles repeats that. So throughout the first temple period, Passover was celebrated exactly as Moses said. And again, here are the priests in the first This is Solomon's temple, and as they are getting the lamb prepared. Now, Solomon's temple was destroyed. In 586, Nebuchadnezzar came, and we had a 70-year captivity. For 70 years, we didn't have a Passover sacrifice, a Korban Pesach. The Jewish people that lived in Judea for 70 years did not celebrate Passover. The Jewish people that were taken, Judea that was taken captive to Babylon, did not celebrate Passover. Now we know that they kept up some form of remembrance, because when Ezra comes back, guess what's the first thing he institutes? The Passover and Sukkot. He institutes these two, and I'm sure all the rest of them, and they restart the Passover sacrifices once again. So Ezra either was born in captivity or went there as a little boy, but because he was a Cohen, he was a priest, his father and his uncles and his family taught him as a priest what needed to be done, and they had that remembrance, so that when he comes back to Jerusalem, and with Zerubbabel and Nehemiah and Ezra, they restart the Passover and they celebrate the Passover. That's between 430 and 444 before the Common Era. A second temple was built, Zerubbabel's temple, and now we are back doing the same thing again. On the 10th of the first month at twilight, the 14th at twilight, the lamb, 1 year old, blood on the altar again, roasted, no bones broken, no leftovers, unleavened bread, bitter herbs, with a celebratory meal. And again, there in Ezra 6:19, it says, the exiles celebrate the Passover on the 14th day of the first month. And so they reinstituted everything that Moses had said. They followed exactly. Here is Zerubbabel's temple. Again, not as big as Solomon's temple, but still a place to celebrate. Now, this second temple of Zerubbabel, you could see here Solomon's temple is much bigger, and but they did the same thing. Now at this time, a group of people started coming up that called the Pharisees. A group of, and what they were is lay teachers. They were not part of the priesthood. They were not part of any authority. They did not have authority in Israel. They were laymen. They were lay teachers, very much like what we would have today, Sunday school teachers. And they were not ordained people. And they had teachers, and among their teachers, they used the term Rabbi, which means a maestro, a master teacher, which was the word for anyone that was what we would call today a professor. And so they started adding some stuff in here at this time. In the time of Herod, the actual priests had kind of become very worldly, called themselves the Sadducees after the priest Zadok. And they became very worldly, and they bought offices from Rome and other things. So what happened is that these lay people they knew more than the lay teachers knew more than a lot of the priests did. And so a lot of people gave them a popular authority rather than a authority from Adonai, from the word. And so a lot of people followed them. But they started adding stuff and taking away stuff. And they took and added, changed dates and changed the calendar and different things like that. And so, but this is still the template, the Mosaic template. And to this day, we have to follow this template. Now, we have, at this point, Yeshua's Passover. Matthew 26, 1 through 29, Luke 22 gives us the idea of Yeshua's Passover around 70 AD, maybe around as far as 33 AD. Now, Yeshua and the apostles, when Yeshua was 12 years old, it says they came from Nazareth to Jerusalem as their custom was to celebrate Passover. And they came, because remember, you can't celebrate Passover in Nazareth or in Beersheba or any place else. It has to be in Jerusalem. And so Yeshua and Joseph and Mariam came and they celebrated Passover. Well, when Yeshua, with his disciples, on what we call the last Passover, we don't call it the Last Supper, because remember, Yeshua ate 2 more times. Yeshua ate after his resurrection, the night of his resurrection, he ate. When he appeared to them, he says he was hungry, and he says, do you have anything to eat? And they gave him a piece of grilled fish and some honey, and it says, which he ate in front of them. So he ate. And then when a couple of weeks later, when they were in the Galilee, he's fishing, they're fishing, and he's on the shore, and he's making some tilapia there. And by the way, tilapia is called St. Peter's fish, or St. Peter's fish is tilapia. And that's the fish of the Sea of Galilee. So he was making some fish there, 153 of them. But when they came and they had breakfast of fish there in the morning. So Yeshua ate 2 more times. But this is his last Passover. He says, I will not drink of the fruit of the vine until I drink it anew with you in the kingdom. And that's the millennial kingdom that's coming. Now in Yeshua's Passover, he did all the above. He did at twilight, the lamb. Remember, he told Peter and John to prepare the room, prepare the Passover, and that I long to celebrate this Passover. So Yeshua did celebrate Passover. A lot of people are saying, no, he celebrated some pre-Passover meal or something that had nothing to do with the Jews. Yeshua started something for the Gentile. No, that's not. But one thing that Yeshua does is Yeshua starts an after supper element. He adds a third part. Now, as soon as the celebratory meal was finished in the celebration of Passover and the way the Jews were doing it in the second temple, that was the end. And they would, have songs and talk the rest of the night. But Yeshua, after supper, he took a cup, another cup. There's always a beginning cup in every Jewish celebration. You take the cup and you open the celebration with a blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri hagafen. Blessed are you, Adonai, King of the universe. You've given us the fruit of the vine. And then you partake of the meal. And then at the end of the celebration, you close with, again, a final cup, just a final toast, we would say today. And so the first cup, the second cup was done, but Yeshua adds a third cup. Now, what's interesting about this is that the Jewish Passover did not have this third part. Yeshua added the third part. And then he added in the third part what we call afikomen. Now the afikomen is not Jewish. The afikomen is Yeshuic. It is Yeshua. In fact, the word afikomen is not a Hebrew word. The word afikomen is a Greek word that means the coming one. The one who is coming in the future. It's future tense. It's coming in the future, the coming one. Now, if you read the book of John, especially John, he always is talking about, I am the coming one. I will come. And so this idea of Yeshua coming, and with the cup and the bread, the afikomen, Yeshua says that the coming one bread is himself. This is my body. This is my blood. And so Yeshua starts that. Now, what's interesting is that at some point in time, this third part of Yeshua has been added to the Pharisee model. And in today's Pharisee model, the rabbinic model today, a normal Jewish Passover Seder today, it has Yeshua's third part. When did it come in? And we're going to be studying that within the next 3 weeks. Now, Yeshua had his Passover, and this is what the Passover table looked like. This is called a triclinian celebratory meal. When they celebrated in biblical times, they celebrated in a horseshoe style. But unlike what we do today, most people put Yeshua here in the middle and a set of disciples here and a set of disciples here. No, Yeshua, the host, is the second person. The first person on the table is the youngest person, which would be John. This was John, and so he would be the youngest. Then the host, then the next person to the left of the host was what we would call the left-hand man. Today we use the word right-hand man, but in those days it was the left-hand man. This was the most important person on the table. And contrary to what we do today, when we have a meal, everybody sits down wherever they want. In those days, the host would say, you go here, you're number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Because, and that's where in the Psalms it says, when you go to a meal in Yeshua, and we're told, and when you go to a meal, do not go to the first part, because the host must say, you go sit over there. No, you go over there, and the host must say, you come over here. And so John was the first, Yeshua was the second, and the third was Judas. Think of it, Judas was the most important person in that table, and they all went around, and guess who this guy is? That's Peter. Now, this is when Yeshua says, one of you will betray me. Now, notice that he is dipping, and Judas will now dip with him on the maror. Now, it's interesting that they dip together in the maror because that's bitter herbs. And this idea of Judas and Yeshua dipping together and in bitter herbs. Now, when Yeshua says, one of you will betray me, they heard what he said, but Peter is saying, ¿Qué dijo? ¿Qué dijo? What did he say? He's telling John, what did he say? And of course, we know that Peter was the last one to be here because he was the last one that Yeshua washed his feet. And by the way, this week, I was given some free tickets to go review a new movie that is coming out. I don't know if you've all heard, there's a new movie coming out called The Last Supper. And I believe it is produced by Chris Tomlin, I believe. And Chris Tomlin is an excellent musician, excellent worship leader. But he produced this film. And so we went to go review it and to see. It's coming out, I believe, the 15th of March. And at the end of the movie, the lady that was presenting the movie asked, does anybody want to do a review? Anybody want to see what you liked? And of course, people said, oh, it was magnificent, it was tremendous, it was moving, it was all this. And then she saw me, and she actually came with a microphone and put the microphone. What did you think of it? I said, well, I'm sorry, but this is the worst movie I've ever seen. This is the whole audience of the, and I wasn't trying to make a joke. I wasn't trying to be funny or anything like that. And this was here at Century 24 Movie Theater in Albuquerque. And it really was. It's a bad movie as far as the acting And the only thing that I really liked was the costumes. But there was so many historical inaccuracies, and I wrote a review for them too. And I'm saying this publicly because they asked me to give a review. You know, when they ask you to give a review. But if you watch it, you'll see that there's all kinds of words put into Yeshua, into the apostles, a lot of emotion that wasn't there. Most of the movie had to do with Judas and not really Yeshua. And the Yeshua character wasn't really, seemed like a weak Yeshua type person. But the historical inaccuracies, and again, the table, and I'm saying this because of the table, they had Yeshua in the middle, and all kinds of different things that were done. Judas hangs himself at the upper room, not in Al-Qadama, and there's all kinds of things that my wife and I were looking at this, and she was saying, oh, you know, this happened and this didn't happen, and so if you do go see it, plan on, not seeing an accurate portrayal of the Last Supper, the last Passover. And I don't know why they make Yeshua not to be Jewish. The only Jewish person there that looked Jewish was always Judas. And Yeshua always is, he was a hippie Yeshua his wig was really bad and teased hair and all that. It's a bad movie. Sorry, Chris Tomlin. Afterwards, of course, when I got out, I got several sneers, and some lady says, oh, you ruined it for us. And another person says, you poisoned everyone. After I spoke, she said, anybody else? Sorry. But you asked for my review. This is my review. The last temple Passover occurred in 70 A.D., and in 70 A.D., the temple was again destroyed, like in Zerubbabel's, in Solomon's time. And so since 70 A.D., we have not had a temple. We have not had a Korban Pesach. Now, the Messianic believers, they continue doing all the above from the time of Yeshua to the time of the destruction of the temple. They continue doing the Passover with supper, food and wine. After supper, they continued the third cup and the bread. We know this from Paul's 1 Corinthians, where some of them, now remember, outside of Jerusalem, we're going to see. Outside of Jerusalem, even before 70 AD and after 70, any place in Israel, you could not do Passover. You only had to do what we call today a Seder, an order of service. Today, our Passovers are not a Korban Pesach, a sacrifice, but just a Seder, an order of service. And the readings, but we do not sacrifice a lamb anymore. And of course, the Messianic believers still had the lamb. And by the way, when they had the lamb, remember, you have the whole lamb. It wasn't just parts of the lamb. They roasted the whole lamb. And you could see there where you could go to the cheeks and get the barbacoa. You could get the carne asada from the arm. And of course, they had the menudo there. They ate them. It actually says that the entrails, and so they washed them up and cleaned them up, and of course, the menudo. Outside of Jerusalem and after 70 A.D., no Korban Pesach, as we see from 1 Corinthians, but they did a celebratory meal. Now the Pharisees, no more temple. So there's no blood, no sacrifice. Now they are on the 14th and 15th. In fact, today, they celebrated on the 14th in the afternoon and the 15th at night. And all they use is unleavened bread, bitter herbs. They have a celebratory meal, but they've added the third part of Yeshua. They've added the messianic part. Today, the Pharisees do that. Same thing with the Mishnah and Talmudic rabbis. They have a Seder, They have a Haggadah, which is the telling. They tell the story. They have a third cup. They have the Afikomen. Again, the third cup and the Afikomen, it must be remembered, came from Yeshua. And of course, there's all kinds of traditions and laws added. An egg, parsley, 4 cups, prayers. There's no such thing as 4 cups in biblical times. The only reason the 4 cups occur in the Mishnah, it says that this is a time of celebration. So at every Passover meal, you must have wine, because that's the symbol of celebration. And it says, in any poor family that does not have wine, the community from the benevolence fund should buy the poor family, because wine was expensive, should buy the poor family out of the benevolence fund at least 4 cups of wine, which is 1 bottle, and 4 cups of wine, so that every family has at least 4 cups of wine to celebrate Passover. Well, today, all kinds of things have been added, that the 4 cups mean these 4 things in Exodus, and all kinds of additions. Remember, when it comes to Passover, as with Torah, always remember this: 2 plus 2 equals 4. Can anyone remember that? 2 plus 2 equals 4. 2 plus 2 does not equal 3, so you can't take away. 2 plus 2 does not equal 5, so you can't add. That egg, parsley, 4 cups, and prayers is 2 plus 2 equals 5. That's not what Torah says. And so one of my visions, one of my burdens is for us to get back to, let's do what Adonai told us to do. Again, the Catholic Church, they went to the first day, Sunday. Of course, there's no supper there. All they do is a cup and bread, and only the priest does the cup. They call it the Mass or Holy Communion. Again, totally 2 plus 2 equals 2 to them, because they've taken so much away. Same thing with the Protestant, the Christian world. Every Protestant, remember what the word Protestant means? Protester. Every Protestant is a protesting Catholic. You have to be a Catholic to protest. That's what Luther did. Luther was a Catholic priest, and he protested. I don't like that. I don't like what you're doing there, which he was right. Well, he became a protester. But in a sense, the Protestant community, and we'll call today the Christian community, are Catholics that are not what we call high church. They're very low church. And what they do is they still go by Sunday. They still don't have a supper, no cup. Well, they do the little cups, little grape juice. Now remember Paul says to the Corinthians, when they became believers, they brought in their Corinthian ways, their worldly Corinthian ways. And some of them were getting drunk and overeating at the Passover celebration. Can you imagine having a little Passover celebration in your house and 2 or 3 people are drunk and, these guys are eating away? Paul says no. Well, wait a second. Can you get drunk on a little cup like that of grape juice? No. Can you overeat a little piece of bread? No. So it can't. Remember what Yeshua said, as often as you do this in remembrance of me. What is the this? The this is Passover. The this is Passover with Yeshua's added part. Now, we're going to stop here, but for the next 4 weeks, we're going to take what we got here, and we're going to expand it. We're going to get more into the life of Yeshua. We're going to do a lot on his last week. We're going to go through the idea of how Yeshua has celebrated Passover on a Tuesday night. He was crucified on Wednesday, died on Wednesday at 3. And at sundown, he was buried. And for the next 3 days and 3 nights, he was in the grave. And on Saturday night, he resurrected on Saturday night, which is in biblically the first day of the week, the first day of the week begins at sundown on Saturday night. That's totally, most people don't know that. And so we're going to go back chronologically. We're going to go back historically. We're going to go back religiously, biblically, and find out what really occurred at Passover. So I hope that every one of you joins us every Sabbath morning for the next, until Passover. And we will be on Wednesday nights, we'll be training the men. In fact, we're going to go to Roswell and spend a day in Roswell here and training all the different brothers there at the Roswell Messianic Center there, and training on doing Passover. And anyone that wants to learn, please let us know. By the way, we do have a new phone number, 505-205-2374. New phone number here at the congregation, if anybody wants to ask any questions, things like that. And so we are excited to be able to share with each and every one of you on Passover, preparing for Passover, and hope that little bird's eye view here today, now we could go into every one of these parts and break them down. Let's go ahead and stand. Our Father, we thank you for the opportunity that we have to be able, Father, to study your word, to study Torah, to study about Passover. There's so much about Passover, Father, that by studying it popularly, or the way this denomination or that Jewish group or that Christian group does it, and people are doing Passovers in a wrong way. And so, Father, allow me to, as a professor, be able to share with each one the Torah. Yeverechecha Yahweh va'ish merecha. Air Yahweh panavelecha vichunecha. Asa Yahweh panavelecha vayasem lecha. Shalom. May Yahweh bless you and keep you. May Yahweh make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May Yahweh lift up the light of his countenance upon you and give you his peace. Shalom, shalom. Take your seats for a moment here.
Shalom, shalom. Welcome to Olive Tree Fellowship and Torah Unleashed Ministries. Thank you for joining us on our channel. If you have enjoyed this teaching and would like to see more, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to click the notification bell so that you can be notified when we have new videos. If you would like to support Olive Tree Fellowship and Torah Unleashed Ministries, please visit us at olivetreefellowship.com or torahunleashed.org. We thank you for your past support and hope to continue with you. Shalom, shalom. Have a good day. Shalom, shalom y bienvenidos a Olive Tree y a la Torah desatada. Les doy gracias a ustedes y a Adonai por su apoyo que nos han dado aquí. Y si quieren continuar a hacer una donación, pueden ir aquí en torahunleashed.org o en olivetreefellowship.com y ahí pueden dar una donación. Su apoyo, su ayuda es importante en estos días. Shalom, shalom.